Hi, Andrew from Kensington Wine Market here for your single sample session of our Ardmore 1997 Kensington Wine Market exclusive cask from Gordon MacPhail. It is bottled under the Connoisseur's Choice line from a refill sherry hogshead in which it matured for 25 long years, a quarter century if we're being specific, before bottling at 50.3%. Ardmore is a distillery that I sometimes find a little hit or miss. I've never felt that way with Gordon MacPhail bottlings. In fact, Ardmore from Gordon MacPhail has by and large been a standout in some of the best Ardmores I've ever had. And I think that's partly because Ardmore seems to work really well with sherry. But I've had a lot of refill ex-bourbon, refill sherry cask Ardmores that just didn't meet my expectations in the past, and sometimes I found a bit challenging. So for me, it's one of those distilleries where I really need to try the liquid before I'm confident that it's going to work for me and for the business as a whole. A little bit about Ardmore before we get into the whiskey, but never hurts to pour it and let it breathe a little. So let's do that. Get a little in our glass. Hopefully you've done the same with yours at home. So Ardmore is a Victorian-era distillery established in 1898, not far from Aberdeen, near the village of Kennethmont. The distillery was founded by Adam Teacher, who is the son of William Teacher, the founder of the famous Teacher's blended Scotch whiskey brand. And the whiskey's been associated with that brand ever since. It has changed hands a couple of times. Most notably, it became part of Beam Global in 2006, and then becoming part of Beam Suntory when Suntory purchased Beam in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Over its history, it has consistently produced a heavily peated or a moderately peated single malt, and that's sort of unusual. You see a lot of Highland distilleries today experimenting with peated malt, whether in small amounts or in large amounts. Distilleries like Tomatin with their Kuboken certainly comes to mind. And a number of Speyside distilleries like Ben Riach, which started distilling peated malt in the 70s. But Ardmore was producing at least a portion of peated malt right from the beginning and has done so ever since. And that relationship with Teachers is carried on to this day. Teachers is now under the Beam Suntory portfolio, along with Laphroaig and Ardmore. The distillery itself, it's a middle-sized distillery, produces a little over 4 million liters a year. Initially 2 pairs of stills, that was doubled in 1955 to 4, and then doubled again to 8 stills in 1974. Has a relatively long fermentation, roughly 70 hours, and it's generally sourced peat from the area around the distillery. And I believe I remember seeing somewhere that they recently helped to restore some peat lands in the vicinity of the distillery itself. Gordon MacPhail, we talk about a lot in these tastings, but just in general, the shop, we're huge fans of what they do. Truly believe that as an independent bottler, but really as a player in the Scotch whiskey, they've kind of set themselves apart and raised the bar in terms of quality and expectations. And this is especially true of anything that goes into their sherry casks. They have different specifications than most producers do with their sherry cask. They have a standard that's higher than most, a seasoning period which is longer. And I think one of the benefits of that is that they're kind of trying to replicate what were the traditional sherry casks of yore, which were these thicker stave casks used for transporting sherry. They were called sherry transport casks, to transport the wine from Spain to the United Kingdom for bottling. And it comes out in the whiskey. You get things that can be both heavily sherried, but at the same time very balanced and well nuanced, because it's not about the wine necessarily that was in the cask before. It's more about the wood and the way the wood is seasoned. And I've said earlier in this video session that I really feel most of the best Ardmore bottlings I've ever had have been from Gordon MacPhail, and I think that's, again, because of the quality of sherry casks that they're using. They're not finishing their whiskeys. Their whiskeys are going into a cask and then spending their life in it. And the reason they're able to do that is that they've got quality assurance from day one. They've got such control. They're not purchasing casks of whiskey from distilleries. They're buying spirit. Now, I should be using past tense there because last year Gore MacPhail stopped fillings. They stopped filling spirits from distilleries because they want to focus on their two going concerns, which are Ben Romick and the Cairn. I've got actually a bottling of blended malt they've produced for the Cairn here, which, by the way, if you're in Scotland, this is well worth picking up. Possibly one of the best bottlings around, in my opinion. But back to our Ardmore here. I've been fortunate over the years. I've been in the industry now for a little over 20 years. I've tried to do some math to figure out how many Ardmores I've had, because when I was writing my tasting note for this, I was really struck. This doesn't happen very often, but I was just completely blown away by the complexity and the delicacy of the palate. So I started trying to figure out how many Ardmores have I sampled over the years. And just from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, we've had nearly 40 bottlings of Ardmore come through Kensington Wine Market. I haven't tried them all, but I've tried 95% of them. On top of that, there's been at least another 65 to 70 Ardmores that have come through that I have a record of. There's probably been more. I've tried Ardmores at whiskey festivals. I've tried them at tastings. I've tried them at bars around the world when I've been traveling as part of my job. So I think it's safe to say I've probably tried well over 100 different Ardmores in my career. And without exaggeration or hyperbole, this is the best Ardmore I've ever had. And I'm not just saying that because I have to sell it. We do have to sell it, but it is stunning. So let's dive into it. Now, glassware can have a big impact on whiskey, especially older whiskeys. I wish we could sell these, but for some of these older, more delicate whiskeys, I really love these old school blenders glasses from Elixir Distillers. Really concentrate the aromas in the glass. But what you have here is something that's very deep, dark, elegant. There's a touch of smoke there, but it's not really the driving force. The smoke is part of the picture. The sherry's part of the picture, but they're just working really well together. Nice chocolate tones towards that sweeter, more milk chocolate side of the equation. Get notes of old Armagnac, leather, tobacco. And there's a meatiness to this too. Like I was really struck by it. For those of you in Western Canada, at least, ginger beef is a big thing here, especially in our Western Canada-ized Chinese food. I get a note of ginger beef in there, but also like teriyaki beef jerky. There's some cool things going on here. The fruits, there are some of those classic like raisins, dates, figs, dried fruits, but it's starting to stray into more tropical tones. Let's go ahead and give it a taste. On the palate, it's old school. It's rich. And what I mean by old school is this tastes like sherry cask whiskeys from 20 years ago. Earlier in my career, casks that have been filled in the 50s and the 60s. Most sherry casks today are sherry seasoned casks. They're not proper sherry casks. And some of them are sort of sped up through the process. They're rushed to get them to the producers as quickly as possible. And you get more of a new school, which is kind of a heavier, spicier profile of sherry. This really like delicate, rounded style of sherry. The only way to truly describe it is old school. It's got this antique-y feel to it. You instantly know the whiskey's old. It's matured slowly. You can't rush this kind of style of whiskey. And to Gordon MacPhail's credit, I guess you can't really cheap out on the casks either. Like the quality of sherry casks really matters, and the length of seasoning, I guess is what I'm trying to say, really matters here. So there's more of those ginger beef, teriyaki notes in here. It's got that nice soft meatiness to it. The smoke, it's clean, it's elegant. The peat's just almost a touch, like a faint touch muddy or slightly ashy. Really into that milk chocolate side of things. Loads of spices. It's got this fresh eucalyptus, mentholyptus mintiness to it. There's a lot going on here, and even though this is 25 years in sherry, even though it's rather rich, it's still leaving room for some of those delicate spirit characteristics, those maturation, oxidative notes of like more tropical fruits to come through. Absolutely gorgeous. Lovely finish. It's juicy. There's just tons of fruit now. The spices, the chocolate, leather, tobacco, all those nice little tones are all really well in balance. The finish is long, elegant. What else can I say? This is an absolutely rock star knockout, whiskey. And we're very grateful to have bottled for the shop. Only available at Kensington Wine Market. It's $400 a bottle, which I know is not an inexpensive bottle, but I can tell you this whiskey is worth every penny. So, hope you enjoyed the tasting. If you got any questions, comment on the post, email the shop. We'll be happy to answer them. And until next time, Slange.